Okay, so the first email we're going to go over, we got an email from someone. I'm going to call her Betsy. We don't want to call anyone out by their real names and embarrass anybody, but we got an email from Betsy, and the email says, "Hi, I'm researching finance companies for my husband. He has 19 years Class A driving experience as a company driver, long haul and local, and he's at the point that he wants to solo as an owner operator. We've registered the business and got the EIN. As he continues to work as a company driver, we are doing some research on his days off looking for decent used semi and financing offers. We really haven't had much luck as most of the financing companies deal with people with bad credit. My husband has great credit, high 700s or low 800s. I wanted to ask Smarter Finance USA if there are any good financing options for someone in our situation. We have money available for a down payment, but we will have to finance. I was hoping to find a company that offers a low interest rate. Thanks in advance for any help you can offer." And so, Betsy, the only way to deal with business owners, we believe, is straight up. And I'll tell you what happens when you deal with people straight up right from the get go. A small portion of them get angry with you, and we actually like that because if you deal with someone straight up and they get angry with you, they're not ever going to face reality. And we like not to deal with those people because we're probably not going to be doing business with them, and communicating further would be a waste of time. However, we also find that the folks that are really serious super appreciate the fact that we're straight up with you. We've been told by a lot of our customers that it's rare in the marketplace to have people not dance around the subject. So let's be straight up. There's no Santa Claus, there's no Easter Bunny, and low rate or low interest rate financing for a startup trucker does not exist. Now, let's talk a little bit about that because we last week's show we had May Philpott on, and we talked about how things like interest rate are sometimes it's really an arbitrary number, and I kind of want to go over this with you. Maybe you've seen they have the Susie Orman show. And the people will call in and they'll ask her, "Can I afford this?" And you'll have someone call in and they have $3,000 in the bank and they want to buy a picture of Elvis that costs $2,000. And she says, "No, girlfriend, you cannot afford this." And so I thought we'd play a game like that, only we're not going to talk about Elvis pictures or pinball machines or something dumb like that. We're going to talk about business opportunities and kind of how to tell if the rate makes sense for you or not. Because what you consider to be a low interest rate is going to be a far cry from what you're going to be offered as a startup business. Period. There's just no way around it. So this is what I want you to do. Take out a piece of paper, and I want you to draw a line down the middle of that piece of paper. And on the left-hand side, you didn't tell me what your husband's name was. We'll just call him Steve. And so I want you to write on the left-hand side in big numbers, Steve's current income working for the man, driving somebody else's truck. And in our experience, most of the time, and it depends what area of the country you're in, but most of the time, the income generated driving somebody else's truck will be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $5,000 a month. Now, if it's more than that, feel free to put a higher number in there. But what we typically see is $5,000 a month. Now, on the left-hand side, so that's choice A. And I want you to circle that number that you wrote down, whether it's 5,000 or 4,000 or 6,000. Make a big, giant circle around it. Now, let's go to the other side of the line. And the first step is let's figure out how much revenue is going to be generated by Steve driving his own truck. And so you may not know that at this point. What I can tell you from talking to dozens and dozens of truck operators, owner operators, is a lot of times we see contracts that pay around $2 per mile. Now, in the beginning of this year, it was a little lower than that for a very brief period of time. And the reason for that, if you remember, the price of oil became almost free. And all of a sudden, all the folks in the oil industry were scrambling to keep their trucks on the road. And rates for loads became very, very, very competitive. But of course, I mean, oil couldn't be whatever it was, $22 or something dumb like that per barrel. Oil wasn't going to stay like that forever. And as oil prices have come back up and the industry stabilized, we're back to that normal, like $2 a mile. And we're going to assume in this case that you're talking about a long haul truck and not local trucking. And so, of course, we do sometimes talk to people that say, well, I only got offered $1 a mile. Well, you don't take that deal. And if you can only get offered $1 a mile, you don't go into business. Keep driving somebody else's truck because that's going to be a better deal for you. But in reality, the amount you're going to get paid should be somewhere around $2 a mile. And Steve will probably be driving somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 miles a week. So you take that $2, or if it's $1.75 or whatever, and you multiply it by that 2,500, and you get $5,000 a week. Or, since there's 4 weeks in most months, a little bit more, but we'll just use 4 weeks, that's $20,000 a month. Now, of course, that's not the income. That's the revenue, because now we have to deduct the costs. And the major cost that you have running an owner-operator long-haul trucking, first of all, you got to count fuel. And fuel can change in price, obviously, from week to week. But so we're going to put $4,000. That sounds pretty reasonable and pretty close to normally what we hear people telling us that the fuel is going to run them. So it's $4,000, and that's a month. So we're going to put under that $20,000 or whatever number you stuck there, we put minus $4,000. Now, next, obviously, you're going to have insurance. And insurance varies. It can be different from state to state. And if you have bad credit, it might be higher than if you have good credit. But we're just going to put in there $750 a month for insurance. Because in some states, I've heard a lot less. In some states, I've heard a little bit more. But we're just going to be reasonable here. And then I'm hoping with your truck, you're going to set aside at least $1,000 a month for maintenance. Because, I mean, you're going to be driving that truck. It's going to break sometimes. And you're going to need tires and all sorts of other things. And then we're also going to stick another $1,000 in there for other costs that can arise just out of running your business. And so I want you to minus all those numbers from that original $20,000. And that's $13,250 left over before your truck payments. Now, let's talk about what the truck payments are going to be. We're going to assume a $75,000 truck. That's going to be a pretty decent truck that's going to keep you on the road without hassles for a long time. Now, let's pretend there was no interest charges at all. Let's pretend the Tooth Fairy came down and gave you as a startup, not ever going to happen, but gave you as a startup a loan at 0% interest. That would run you, assuming a 5-year deal, $1,300 a month. So you take that $1,300 and you minus it from the $13,250 we just calculated. Of course, your numbers may be different. Do your own numbers, but you're going to end up with $12,000. Now, let's circle back to reality. What you're actually going to get offered. Now, as somebody, congratulations, by the way, for having great credit. As somebody with great credit, the rates you're going to be offered are much lower than what you'd be offered as somebody with bad credit. And what you might see in terms of, and it's not an interest rate when you finance a truck as a startup. It's always done as a lease, but we're going to assume a dollar out lease, meaning you own the truck at the end, and we're going to impute a 13% rate on that lease, meaning for every roughly 13%. So for every $10,000 borrowed, you're going to pay $1,300 a year in finance charges, even though the contract won't actually say that. It will just show you a payment. Now, people that don't know anything might tell you that's crazy. I mean, that's who cares? Here's the deal. Paying that rate instead of 0%, which you're never going to get, creates a payment of $2,145 a month compared to that $1,300. Let's look at the actual impact. So remember, at a 0% rate, you'd be left with $12,000 a month after making all of your expenses. At that higher rate, it's going to be closer to $11,000. So whatever number you get, if it's $11,000 or if it's a little bit more or it's a little bit less, I want you to make big circles around it. Now, on the left-hand side of that paper, we have the $5,000 or $4,000 or $7,000, whatever Steve's currently making. That's in a big circle. On the right-hand side of the paper, we're going to have the number we just circled, which is what he would be making using reasonable assumptions after all the costs are included in the business. Now, if your numbers are anywhere near normal, you're going to see $5,000 on the left-hand side, and you're going to see $10,000 or $11,000 on the right-hand side, which means getting approved for financing for that truck at that interest rate that you don't like means doubling your income. It's like having two Steves driving down the road instead of one. Now, more importantly, I also want to talk to you about something called opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is simply the cost of not doing something. And for example, if I decide that like my wife decided a number of years ago that she wanted to go to nursing school, and the cost of going to nursing school wasn't only the cost of actually paying for the nursing school, but also the cost of not working for the 2.5 years until she was able to become a registered nurse, because the amount of time that it took her to go to school meant she couldn't hold down a full-time job at that same time. Now, in this case, it sounds like you're only looking for the financing or looking to start your business here part-time while you're trying to find rates that probably don't really exist. And the question is, how long is that going to take you before you come to terms with the fact that you're going to have to pay what financing really costs? And what I mean by that, so we just went over, if, for example, your income is $5,000 a month, but you could increase your income to $10,000 a month after expenses by getting into financing and getting your own truck. Every additional month that takes you to make that decision will cost you $5,000. So if you don't make that decision for 3 months because you continue to search and you continue to search, you've just cost yourself $15,000. And that's the opportunity cost of simply what you're missing out on.